Okay, yeah, so we're live on Twitter and on YouTube. Um, yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in to this week's In Review with Dimitri Lascaris and Rami Yahya. Um, just to maybe start by commenting in the chat where you're tuning in from. Also, if you could drop a thumbs up, share maybe the live stream with a couple of friends or on your feed, just to make sure that as many people as possible join us and get to hear our commentary. We will be discussing different events that happened this week, mainly the alleged shooting of Israeli embassy staffers in the United States, as well as some footage that I was able to find of the South African president's discussion with Trump in Washington. So we have Big Mini saying hi, Claire saying hello from rainy Ireland. Which city in Ireland are you from, Claire? We have Bangladesh from Imtiaz, Iceland, Vera Olafsdottir from Iceland, Ramplants, the usual.
Laura from San Francisco, Big Meanies from New York City. We got Anna Jackson from Columbia, South Carolina. Welcome. Claire's in West Cork.
Claire, are you aware of an organization in Cork called Gaza Go Bra? I met these people in Cork doing great work for Palestine there. Lovely city.
We have Abolish NATO from New Jersey. We have Zrinka from Zagreb. Welcome. Angela Mira
from Belfast.
Occupied Belfast. Welcome, Bill. Welcome. Claire said, in answer to your question, no. So, Rami, shall we get started?
Absolutely. Dimitri, you're still in Kalamata, right?
Yes, I am. In the center of town today, where there have been some internet problems, but hopefully they're not going to affect us. But Rami will ever ably deal with the crisis if it arises.
Absolutely. So. And I'm still in Urumqi, Xinjiang Autonomous Region of the People's Republic of China. So yeah, Dimitri, should we get to business and start with our agenda? Let's look at the notes over here that we have. So yeah, so I'm currently still in Xinjiang, in Urumqi. Tomorrow, I'm planning on visiting the city of Tulpan, which is around an hour away, 100 kilometers away from Urumqi. I'm hoping to get to see what these smaller cities of Xinjiang look like. I have 2 reports that I'm planning on publishing. One with a youth group here in Xinjiang that has been doing some great street art and really opened my eyes to how the youth of Xinjiang, of Urumqi, are living. And another report around just a little walking tour of Urumqi with some commentary. So this is what you should expect from me to publish once I find the time to sit down and edit, or the motivation. Dimitri, I really think no one appreciates enough your strong work ethics. It's very difficult to pump out a report, and you're doing one every day or every other day. So big shout out to you, Dimitri.
Thank you, man. If I were your age, I probably would not be spending as much time doing reports as I am. So, in any event, as Rami mentioned, I'm in Kalamata, but I'm not going to be here for much longer. I'm going to be leaving for a couple of months. My next destination remains uncertain. It's a place I've been trying to get into for some time, and things are looking good, but I don't want, for security reasons, to disclose what this destination is likely to be. And after that, whether I get there or not, my next destination is going to be Canada. I've been out of Montreal for a while, and I think it's time that I went home and reestablished my my presence in the city, for what that's worth. So, with no further ado, shall we get into our first topic of the day? Before we're going to, after we talk about what happened in Washington, we're going to talk about a variety of other subjects quickly, and then do a Q&A. So why don't you start us off, comrade?
Yeah, absolutely. So on May 21st, I mean, I woke up on May 22nd hearing of this news coming in out of New York, since I was in China. So May 21 in the evening, outside the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C., the assailant, who is still innocent until proven guilty, the alleged assailant, Elias Rodriguez, entered the event happening inside the Capitol Jewish Museum. And while the event was coming to an end, two Israeli embassy staffers who were participating to the event, as they were leaving, were allegedly shot and killed. The two staffers are Yaron Lischinski and Sarah Milgram. Media did a great job at humanizing them, although they are agents of a genocidal entity, claiming that they were about to get engaged a month or so after this event in Jerusalem. Elias Rodriguez started chanting "Free Palestine" during the shooting and after, and published a manifesto. Um, Now, Rodriguez has been arrested. He's being charged with first-degree murder and possible hate crime charges. And there has been multiple condemnation from U.S. and Israeli officials. And keep in mind that this shooting happened, I believe, 1 or 2 days after um, Israeli occupational forces, Israeli genocidal forces started shooting at European and Arab diplomats in Jenin. So, Dimitri, am I forgetting anything important over here?
Just a couple of details, and one thing I really want to stress, which I think you've already touched on. Yaron Lischinski, the male victim, was 30 years old, and his partner Milgram was 26. I don't know if you mentioned that various media outlets reported, pretty much all of them did, that apparently they were about to be engaged to be married. Yaron planned to propose marriage to his partner in Israel. This live stream will be the first time I have discussed their killings publicly. Probably also for Rami, it would be the first time. For myself, I've refrained from commenting until now because I wanted more information before doing so. But even now, 4 days after the killings, there's a lot we don't know. There's more we don't know than we know. The prime suspect, as Rami mentioned, a young man by the name of Elias Rodriguez from Chicago. I stress that no one should assume that Rodriguez is guilty of the crimes, the very serious crimes of which he is accused. He's entitled to the presumption of innocence until proven guilty in a court of law. And today, rather than focus on, the question of whether he did it, he actually did it. We just don't have enough information to know whether he was the person who killed these two individuals. I'd like to discuss, based on the limited information we have, 4 aspects of these killings. First, the media coverage. Second, the moral character of the killing, assuming him to have done it for the reasons he stated. Third, the question of whether this killing can fairly be described as anti-Semitic. And fourth, whether this might have been some kind of a false flag operation. So let's start with the media coverage. And I think it's important always, when you're talking about something like this, place it in the context of the larger crisis in Palestine. And I'd like to say a few words about the death toll in Gaza in the week in which Lischinski and Milgram were murdered. If you could pull up image 1, please, Rami. This is a report that was put out the day after the killing of Lischinski and Milgram, and it relates to the week leading up to May 21st, the day of their killing. So during that week, according to the United Nations, 629 Palestinians were reportedly killed. At least 358 were killed because of attacks targeting houses and tents for displaced people, with children and women comprising at least 148 of the victims. So that's 74 times the victims that Israel sustained on the evening of May 21st in Washington, D.C. The high number of strikes on shelters in the context of, if you could leave that up there just for a second, Rami. Thank you. I'm quoting from the Office of the Coordination of Human Rights, the UN. The high number of strikes and shelters in the context of the existing destruction of infrastructure in Gaza raises grave concerns that not all strikes were targeting military objectives. And they go on to add that during the past week alone, 9 Palestinian journalists were killed, making it one of the deadliest for the profession since the conflict began in October 2023. And one other thing happened, which a particularly heinous, monstrous act, unspeakable. I believe shortly after this statement was put out by the United Nations. If you could pull up, please, image number 2, Rami. And many of you will have already heard of this appalling news. In one strike, the monstrous Israeli regime killed 9 of 10 children belonging to a couple of doctors in Gaza, who apparently were at a medical facility, one of the few that is still operating in some manner, tending to victims, non-family victims of the genocidal entity when 9 of their 10 children were massacred. So that's what's happened in the last, and that's certainly not an exhaustive list of Israel's crimes by any stretch of the imagination, during this period where so much attention was being paid to, in the Western media, to the killing of these 2 individuals. There's been wall-to-wall coverage of the deaths of these Israeli embassy staffers, with many reporters, as Rami said, doing their utmost to humanize the 2 victims, and also to elicit maximum sympathy for their deaths and maximum anger at Palestinians, even though the alleged killer was not Palestinian, or as far as we know, was not even Muslim, was an Arab, and his name sounds Hispanic to me. In any case, could you please pull up image number 3? What you're seeing here, what we're going to show you is the headline of a tirade put out by the infamous Barry Weiss, former bigwig reporter at the New York Times, a fanatical Zionist. Welcome to the global intifada. And in this, she basically blames the entire Palestinian solidarity movement for this crime. Very predictable. Also predictable that Barry Weiss in this tirade did not mention that Israel destroyed Iran's consulate last year in Damascus in a far worse attack upon diplomats in a foreign country than was committed in Washington, whoever may be guilty of the murder. 16 people died in Israel's attack on the consulate, a flagrant violation of international law. And nor did Barry Weiss mention, even though it had just happened, that on the day following the murder of these 2 individuals from the Israeli embassy, Israeli forces fired upon 25 diplomats from 25 different countries, including Canada and numerous Western states, in the West Bank, outside the entrance to Jenin. And I interviewed Rehab Nazal, a Palestinian Canadian who lives in Bethlehem and has family from Jenin this week. We've already published a report, and she explained what they were doing, what provoked the Israeli military, these lunatics, to start firing so-called warning shots at these diplomats and causing them to run for cover, was that they began to approach an entrance to Jenin, which has been completely emptied of its Palestinian population by extreme violence and threat. So evidently, they didn't want these diplomats to see what was inside. And that's why they terrorized them by shooting at them. So Barry Weiss didn't mention any of this, of course, because Palestinians mean nothing to her. By paying so much attention to the victims of the Washington attack and so little attention to the far more numerous victims of Israel's murder spree, Barry Weiss and the Western corporate media, of course, continue even at this stage to devalue Palestinian lives. But it's not just Palestinian lives that they are devaluing. by placing so much emphasis and giving so much attention to this one act of deadly violence, it's also the thousands of victims of mass killings in the United States whom we never hear about. If you could please pull up image 4, Rami.
Yeah, 1 minute. Yeah.
And this is a CNN article from April of this year. You might not be able to see the figures, but I'll read them out to you. During the last 5 full years, so from 2020 to 2024, there was a maximum in 1 year, that was 2021, of 689 mass shootings in the United States, 689. And the lowest number during the past 5 years was 502 in 2024. This is derived from the Gun Violence Archive, which defines a mass shooting as one in which at least 4 individuals are killed and or wounded, and not including the perpetrator of the attack. I'm not sure that this would even, what happened in Washington would even qualify as a mass killing under in the Gun Archive database, because as a mass shooting, I should say, because as far as I know, no one else suffered significant injuries, but I could be mistaken about that. In any event, the point is that represents, those figures I just cited to you, an average of 621 mass shootings per year in the United States over the 5 prior years, which is about 1.7 mass shootings per day. And just ask yourself, how many mass shootings have the Western corporate media told you about in the United States in the past 5 years? How many can you remember? How many times did they tell you who the victims were, who the perpetrators were alleged to be? Few, if any, of these mass shootings, they're just routine in the United States, receive anywhere near the media attention that the killings in Washington have received for these 2 employees of the genocidal entity. And so, apparently it's not just the lives of Palestinians that matter less to the corporate media. It's also the lives of the thousands of Americans whose names are never mentioned, whose identities are never discussed, whose personal details are never revealed, whose tragic stories are never told by the Western corporate media when they are gunned down in the streets of the United States, oftentimes by people who are simply in a state of extreme mental agitation because they're suffering from substance abuse, they're not receiving the mental health care they receive, or maybe they're just extremely outraged at the injustices they've sustained, whatever it may be. Their stories are not being told. So, of course, the Palestinians get far worse treatment from the media, I think, nowadays than anybody. But it's not just them whose lives are being disvalued. So that's the media coverage. I'd like to move on to the question, and this is obviously a very controversial question, the question about the morality of what was done. And I want to be clear, I'm not, saying this just, what I'm about to say to you, I'm not saying this to you just because I don't want to get in trouble with the censors or with the Israel lobby. This is my honest opinion. I don't believe there's any moral justification for killing unarmed civilians. If unarmed civilians have committed immoral acts, and I'm going to come back to the question of whether these 2 can fairly be described, these 2 victims, of having done things that were immoral, then at a bare minimum, we should condemn them roundly for their disgraceful behavior. And if the immoral acts that they've committed rise to the level of criminality, then the authorities should prosecute them in accordance with due process of law. If it doesn't rise to the level of criminality but still actionable under the civil law, then they should be sued in a court of law. And if appropriate, money damages should be sought against them. But if we, sign off on the proposition that people who are just bad people and who are not armed, who are not in the process of carrying out or threatening to carry out a violent crime, can be gunned down in the street by somebody who has a righteous indignation about them and what they represent, before long, we're going to find ourselves in the jungle, in a complete chaos, and it'll be a barbaric situation that will not be tolerable for anybody. It's important that we respect the rule of law, and this kind of thing can't be allowed to happen. So that's not to say that I don't understand why somebody would do something like this in the current circumstances. But I don't agree that this is something that we should ever tolerate, whoever the unarmed civilians may be. And And that's my honest view. Others may disagree, but that's where I'm coming from. Now, having said all of that, yes, go ahead, please.
Do you plan on elaborating whether these people do count as unarmed civilians?
Well, you know, I'm not employing any elaborate definition of that term. They did not, as far as I know, have any weapons on them, and if they did, I think that would have been reported by now. They were not threatening at the moment they were killed to commit some act of violence. There was no imminent act of violence that they were about to perpetrate that necessitated their killing for the protection of somebody else. And that should be the standard in my view. The fact that I want to come back to this, the fact that they support a genocidal entity, as reprehensible as that may be, and maybe they should have been prosecuted. And I'm going to give some details about this. Hey man, maybe they should have been prosecuted for spreading pro-genocide propaganda. You could make that argument. I could certainly entertain that idea. But the idea that, because they worked in some low-level capacity at the Israeli embassy, it's okay for somebody just to walk up to them and kill them in the streets. No, I don't agree with that.
Do you believe that the lack of faith in this justice system has pushed people to resort to such ways, right? So we see that there has been no accountability to the Israeli government's genocide in Gaza, shooting of diplomats. Do you feel like when the justice system has been delegitimized by turning a blind eye, it pushes people to find ways to bring justice in their own hands, although it might not be, let's just say, legal by definition?
Oh, I'm sure that was a factor here. I'm not sure, but I would be very surprised if that didn't influence the killer, whoever the killer may have been. Absolutely. People have every reason to be outraged. The justice system has completely failed.
One thing I think we forgot to also mention is that Israel has a long track record of shooting diplomats and also people that are political spokespeople for the Palestinian cause and in the region. A few months into the genocide, Israel struck the location where Ismail Haniyeh was resting in Iran while he was on diplomatic duty in Iran.
Yeah.
And also,
Iranian, like I mentioned, the destruction of the Iranian embassy in Damascus, which killed 16 people.
Absolutely.
Right?
But also from the foundation of the so-called Zionist entity, I believe in either 1949 or 1947, Israel killed a UN envoy, a Swedish diplomat named Count Bernadotte, who was supposed to advocate for a settlement to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, quote unquote, in 1948, and which would have brought forward the right of return of Palestinian refugees and forced it to go back to Palestine. And the militias, Jewish militias, Zionist militias, who were then included into the IDF, were part of a terrorist attack that took the life of this Swedish diplomat. So again, I mean, it's while I understand where the sentiment comes from to not glorify or support this killing, it seems like all rules have been completely dissolved, and that is from Israel's initiative from 1947 till today. The systematic attack of diplomats. I mean, they seem to want to call for global sympathy, yet they are the number one cause of death of diplomats, at least in recent history.
Yep, I readily agree with all of that. And I was about to say, I don't know if I actually did say it yet, but just because I take the position that this kind of vigilante justice, people taking the law into their own hands and killing dead members of the Israeli diplomatic corps. Just because I take that position doesn't mean that I put what he did on the same level as what Israel does. No, not at all. I want to be very clear. You can say that these are acts that we shouldn't tolerate as a society, but at the same time say that what Israel is doing is far worse. It absolutely is. This man, and we're going to come back to this, but all indications are that this man or whoever it was who killed these people was actuated, based on what we've been told, by an entirely understandable outrage at what is being done to the Palestinian people, and his extreme frustration with the abject failure of the justice system, either domestically or internationally, to put any kind of accountability on these diabolical war criminals. So although I don't agree with what he did, I don't think it's nearly as bad as what Israel does every single day.
And
go ahead, Rami.
I mean, some people were talking in the chat over here. I believe it was Iranian Kiddo who said this was supposed to distract the news from IDF firing next to Canadian diplomats. This was not just Canadian diplomats. This was pretty much every single European Union diplomat, plus diplomats from the Arab world. I haven't heard much from this since 2 days ago when the attack occurred. Sorry, since the attack that happened on May 21. This is a deliberate attack on a population that is supposed to be protected under international law, right? Free of passage. There's diplomatic immunity for them. They need to protect it at all costs. And an attack on a diplomat is in some way an attack on the state itself. So my question is, where do we, as much as we're talking about those two Israeli embassy staffers, what kind of accountability can we see on behalf of the countries of these diplomats? Do you think they're just going to sweep this under the rug as it's not convenient for our narratives in the West? Curious to know how you could speculate about this.
The firing on the diplomats? The firing on the diplomats in the West Bank? Oh, well, I think you're going to hear me saying a lot of this nowadays. It's the position I've come to, and whether they let them get away with it is really going to depend largely upon us. Are we going to let them get away with it? I've been saying for some months that I think people out there, and I know many people watching here, are doing everything they can. You couldn't reasonably ask for them to do any more, but I know there are a lot of people in our society. I see them, I talk to them constantly, who understand that what Israel is doing is horrible, but really who are doing nothing meaningful. Many people are, but there are many people who get it, or should get it, because they have a functioning brain and access to the internet, where there is copious evidence of genocide staring them in the face, and they're just like quietly wringing their hands and not doing anything, or maybe once in a while they sign some petition that politicians are going to ignore. It's not enough, man. There's not enough people out there escalating to the point where our politicians feel, let's be blunt here. I'm not urging any violence, but we have to make them so uncomfortable with their decision to support this genocidal entity that they ultimately capitulate to our demand to do what's right. They're not going to do it. Appealing to the conscience of these people, I got news for you, man. They have no conscience. I don't think Mark Carney has a conscience. Prime Minister Goldman Sachs, he would have acted by now if he had. I certainly don't think Donald Trump has one. Emmanuel Macron, Starmer, Frederick Merz. No, appeals to conscience are not going to work. You have to put the fear of God into these people without resorting to violence. I think you can do that. But it requires a lot more effort than we're seeing on the part of people who up until now have remained relatively passive. And having said that, I have the utmost respect and admiration for the millions and upon millions of people across the world, hundreds of millions, who have been expending enormous amounts of their time and energy to put a stop to this. So with that, I'd like to go on to the question of the innocence or lack thereof of the two victims. Up until now, you might have noticed that I've been using the word unarmed to describe the victims of this killing. I did not use the word innocent. And that is a term which some people frequently apply to victims of what they describe as terrorism, which a number of people are saying about this particular act. So let's look, for example, at the way in which Canadian Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre described the killing of Liszczynski and Milgram on social media. As you may know, I refer to this clown who came very close to winning the most recent federal election in Canada as a yapping Zionist chihuahua. He puts out a tweet immediately. I am heartbroken and outraged by the brutal murder of Yaron Liszczynski and Sarah Milgram in Washington, D.C. These two innocent souls had lives of promise. And he goes on, to characterize this as essentially an anti-Semitic crime. So this brings us to the question of innocence. And before I get into that question, again, I want to make it crystal clear that whether these people are not innocent, and I simply do not accept that they are innocent souls for reasons I'm going to explain to you, I still maintain that taking the law into your own hands and shooting them dead is wrong, and that we as a society should not tolerate that, and that if we do tolerate it, we're going to descend into barbarism and chaos in our society, something I don't think any of us wants. So please don't conflate my commentary on their moral character, which you'll see, you're going to hear is quite negative, with the question of whether or not this type of violence should be tolerated in our society. So, as is well known, they were working as staffers. That's the way they've been described at the Israeli embassy in Washington. Now, let's just look at the big picture here. What is the mission of the Israeli embassy in Washington? You have to be a rocket scientist to figure out what the overarching priority of that embassy is. The Israeli entity is existentially dependent upon U.S. military support, U.S. economic support, political cover, and legal protection. For example, Donald Trump sanctioning the International Criminal Court and threatening to arrest its lawyers, which, according to Associated Press, has ground the work of the ICC to a halt. Without that support from the United States above all other states, probably the United States support is more important than all other Western states combined to the survival of the genocidal entity. So it only stands to reason that the overarching mission of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States, is to keep the money coming, keep the weapons coming, keep the economic aid coming, make sure that nobody is elected, to the extent you can prevent it, to high office who actually cares about the lives of the Palestinian people, spread the lies of Israel to the maximum possible degree so that Americans don't get so upset with the arming of Israel that they demand that it be brought to an end, gather intelligence on groups, individuals who are critical of Israel, or foreign governments that are critical of Israel. This is what that embassy is there to do. Let's be real here. That embassy is not there to promote peace. It isn't there to promote justice. It is there to advance the genocidal agenda of the Israeli entity. These two individuals put themselves at the service of that mission. And on that basis alone, I find it laughable that anybody would describe them, as Pierre Poilievre did, as innocent souls. These people, if you look at their LinkedIn profiles, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, they had graduate degrees. These presumably they had other, job opportunities, and they weren't doing menial labor at the Israeli embassy. These weren't, people who were just making sure the floors were mopped, or they were washing dishes in the cafeteria. They made sure the light bulbs were on. They were cleaning toilets. They were involved in the so-called diplomatic, the business of diplomacy at the Israeli embassy in Washington. Let's take a look at the LinkedIn profile of Lishchinsky, Yaron Lishchinsky, the male victim. You'll see he describes himself as a research assistant for Middle East and North African affairs at the embassy's political department. I am responsible for keeping the department up to date on important events and trends happening in the Middle East and North Africa, conducting research on topics of interest to our diplomatic staff. I wonder what's of interest to the diplomatic staff of the genocidal entity. And then liaison with other diplomatic missions, maintaining relationships with the local think tank community. In other words, outfits funded by wealthy Zionists who are spreading propagandistic genocidal lies about Palestinians. So he's interacting, or was interacting, with them. And you'll see he made Aliyah from Germany at the age of 16. Let's go and take a further look what happened
Dimitri,
after that.
Just before we continue, one thing that kind of stood out a lot on Twitter is his fluency in English, Hebrew, German, and Japanese, the holy trinity of, let's just say, countries with languages of war crimes. And anyways, that was quite something that stood out.
I think I know what you mean. I get it. So now Liszczynski, let's go to his experience, his LinkedIn experience. This is item number 7. And lo and behold, there at the bottom, you'll see he served in the Israeli military for a little more than 3 years, from August 2013 to August 2016. So this guy, he's a young man. He's not really an adult, but he, the age of 16, he goes to Israel, knowing full well, as he undoubtedly did, that he was going to end up doing military service. Presumably, he could have stayed in Germany and avoided that outcome, but no, he made a choice to go serve in the Israeli military at a time when Israel was committing not only countless war crimes, but also had been adjudged by many human rights experts to be an apartheid state. And during the time that he was in the Israeli military, which was August 2013 to August 2016, the Israeli military carried out its most deadly assault on Gaza up until the genocide began. This was Operation Protective Edge in the summer of 2014, in which the Israeli military massacred over 500 Palestinian children and many other civilians. I mean, we hear that now, and it seems like a relatively mild assault on Gaza, but because of the monstrosities we've witnessed since then. But up until that point in time, it was the worst, the deadliest operation that the genocidal entity had launched against the Gaza Strip. So he was a soldier at that time. It would be interesting to know, since everybody in the corporate media is so fascinated by his personal life, what exactly he did during those 3 years. Was he a participant in Operation Protective Edge? That would be an interesting line of inquiry. If you're going to present him to the public as some kind of, peacenik and innocent soul. So let's move on and let's look at his social media activity. And I'd like you to pull up number 8, Rami, please. This is from his LinkedIn posts. So here is one of the many posts from the Israeli genocide forces that Yaron Liszczynski shared on LinkedIn and on X. Now you'll see this one is about the Houthis, as they call them. It's Ansar Allah, the movement in Yemen that is, trying to put a stop to this genocide at great cost to itself, to its people, and even though we've characterized them as terrorists, any person who I think has a conscience and is remotely objective would say that the real terrorists in this scenario are the Israelis themselves, the Israeli government and military, for whom Yaron Liszczynski volunteered to give his time and energy for some level of compensation. So let's look at the next, the particularly odious post that I want to show you from Liszczynski. It was again an Israeli military post that he shared relating to the Israeli military's latest atrocities against a hospital in Gaza. And you'll see that this is spreading the lies, because they are lies, folks, that Israel is attacking these hospitals because Hamas is using them as a command and control center. There's, or the underground. They have a command and control center underground. It's like ridiculous. After they've destroyed all the hospitals on that basis, why would Hamas think that putting a command and control center under a hospital in Gaza would provide any level of protection at all? Obviously, the Israelis couldn't care less about the protected status of hospitals. So it's absurd to think that Hamas would assume that they're getting any protection out of operating there, and there's really no credible evidence to support the claim that they do. So Liszczynski shares this about 10 days before he was killed. This is pro-genocide, straight up pro-genocide propaganda. Now, shortly after he was, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, with all these posts that he's sharing related to basically providing a screen and legitimizing the genocide, it just pushes me to question what form of, let's just say, accountability do these so-called diplomats have during a genocide. And what I mean by this is, let's just say, if there's any form of justice for the Palestinian people by the end of this genocide on the Palestinian people, can we expect diplomats such as Yaron, or to have any form of accountability for their work in whitewashing these war crimes on the Palestinian people? Would these types of diplomats have any form of can we see any form of accusations against them for their contribution to the genocide?
Well, I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with American law on this subject, but in general, there's the principle of diplomatic immunity, which states respect in most instances, but there are exceptions to diplomatic immunity. Whether there would be an exception under U.S. law for incitement to genocide or spreading pro-genocide propaganda to diplomatic immunity, in this case, I don't know. I just can't. I would have to research that. But I mean, obviously, even if there were an exception available to the prosecutors, what U.S. prosecutor would actually go after an Israeli diplomat for inciting genocide? I mean, it's like zero prospect of that happening in the current world in which we live. But that's an interesting question. So I want to go on and just say a couple of more words about Liszczynski. Just after he was killed, the Times of Israel claimed that Liszczynski and Milgram both aspired to Middle East peace building. And the main evidence that they cited for this claim is that Liszczynski was a huge fan of the Abraham Accords. And you can see this reflected on his commentary on his LinkedIn profile. I think also on his X profile. The Abraham Accords actually were anti-peace. They were anti-peace because they brought a handful of extraordinarily brutal and corrupt Arab autocracies into a state of normalization with Israel without providing in any way, shape, or form for a Palestinian state. In fact, at the time that these states like the UAE and Morocco, I'm thinking of in particular, normalized with the genocidal entity, Israel was relentlessly expanding settlements in the West Bank, which is the little piece of land that the international community, along with Gaza, has reserved for a Palestinian state. So how is that peace building at the end of the day? Those accords, orchestrated by the first Trump administration, were clearly designed to bring Israel into a state of normal relations with the wealthy Arab autocracies without having to provide any justice whatsoever to the Palestinian people. So this doesn't prove that he was a peacenik. Far from it. It proves that he was completely disinterested in justice for Palestinians. And last thing I want to say about his partner, Sarah Lynn Milgram, if you could pull up image 11, Rami.
Yeah.
This is from Milgram's own LinkedIn profile, where she discusses her what she's doing in life. And if you'll see at the very top there, she worked in the Department of Public Diplomacy on a full-time basis starting in November 2023. So the month after Israel began to slaughter Palestinian children en masse, Ms. Milgram decided to take a position in the Department of Public Diplomacy at the Israeli Embassy in Washington, ground zero for Israel's propaganda efforts in the United States, and remained in that position throughout the genocide up until the time of her death. So again, on that ground alone, I can't believe for one second that these people are innocent, but I nonetheless maintain that killing them was wrong and that we cannot, as a civilized society, tolerate that sort of thing. Although I understand, probably why it was done. And I say probably because we just don't know for sure at this stage. There isn't enough evidence, but we will come back to that now, because one of the items we'd like to address today is whether the shooting could fairly be characterized as anti-Semitic. Now, it's not clear based on what I've read that the victims, that the shooter, whoever it may have been, actually knew that the victims worked for the Israeli embassy when he shot them. As you've seen, the fact that they were working at the embassy is publicly available information. They posted that information on social media along with their photographs. So he might well have known just from publicly available information what they looked like and that they worked at the Israeli embassy. But it's not clear that he knew that. When they were shot at the Capital Jewish Museum, not at the embassy itself. However, they were, as I understand it, emerging from an event that had been organized there for young diplomats. So the shooter might have, known that that event was taking place, and that he would have assumed that, or she would have assumed, assuming it was a female who did the shooting, that the Israeli diplomats would be present at that event. At the end of the day, we don't know, what the shooter knew at the time. However, we do have what appears to be a manifesto that he authored. I'm referring here, obviously, to Elias Rodriguez, the accused, which has been obtained and published by the intrepid journalist Ken Klippenstein. And we'd like to show you an excerpt of this. It's on Ken's Substack. So this is item number 12, and this is just the last paragraph. As I said, it's 900 words. I think it's worth it for us to look at this word for word. He says, a word about the morality of armed demonstration. Those of us against the genocide take satisfaction in arguing that the perpetrators and abettors have forfeited their humanity. I sympathize with this viewpoint and understand its value in soothing the psyche which cannot bear to accept the atrocities it witnesses, even mediated through the screen. But inhumanity has long since shown itself to be shockingly common, mundane, prosaically human. A perpetrator may then be a loving parent, a filial child, a generous and charitable friend, an amiable stranger, capable of moral strength at times when it suits him, and sometimes even when it does not, and yet be a monster all the same. Humanity doesn't exempt one from accountability. The action would have been morally justified taken 11 years ago during Protective Edge, around the time I personally became acutely aware of our brutal conduct in Palestine. But I think to most Americans, such an action would have been illegible, would seem insane. I am glad that today, at least, there are many Americans for which the action will be highly legible and in some funny way, the only sane thing to do. I love you, Mom, Dad, baby sis, the rest of my familia, including you, owe something. Free Palestine. So whoever wrote this strikes me as a rather eloquent person, but there's no reference in this entire 900-word manifesto to Jews or Jewish persons. None. It's all about Palestine. And as I say, it was publicly known, publicly available information that these two individuals worked at the Israeli embassy. Their photographs were publicly available. By the way, Fight Back in the chat mentions R.I.P. Aaron Bushnell. I'm pretty sure that in this manifesto, the author specifically referred and honored the act that Aaron Bushnell committed when he set himself alight to protest the genocide in Gaza and his government's responsibility for it. So I see no credible evidence at this stage that this was an anti-Semitic attack. End of story. And as is typically the case, anytime a Zionist who happens to be Jewish is targeted in some way with violence or threats of violence, the political elite and the corporate media immediately and unthinkingly embrace the narrative that it's anti-Semitic. Well, where's the evidence that it's anti-Semitic? The mere fact that one of them was, or both of them were Jewish. There's some question about whether, apparently there's a debate about whether Lishchinsky was Jewish because he belonged to a messianic group called Jews for Jesus. And my understanding is the Israeli government doesn't consider those adherents to be real Jews. But in any event, let's say for the sake of argument that both of them were in fact Jewish. The mere fact that they were targeted with deadly violence does not mean that their Jewishness was the motivation for the crime. And the manifesto makes it quite clear, if it is in fact written by the person who killed these people, that the motivation was the genocide in Gaza. So, do you want to comment on that, Rami, before I move on to the last issue?
I feel like it's a recurring theme whenever anything happens in Palestine, that we're always put on the defensive, where we need to decide whether something is anti-Semitic or not. I truly believe we're far past that debate. And it feels like this is always meant to center anything happening in the Middle East around Jews, rather than on the existential issue here, which is Palestine and the Palestinians. So when we talk about anti-Semitism, it feels like no one could ever, I mean, no one is actually in support of Palestine and the Palestinian people. It's always out of hatred of a random group of people that decided to steal our land in the Middle East. But there's a lot of people in the chat over here that have been discussing, as well as on Twitter, whether this event could have been a false flag. It's always hard to talk about this. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know how much influence we would have by discussing whether it is a false flag or not. But I'm just wondering, Dimitri, during the trial of Elias Rodriguez, is there any information that you would hope to hear or discover during the trial that might shed more light into what actually happened? Is there any information that you think right now would limit you from truly understanding what happened on the 21st of May, and that we might uncover during the trials?
Well, you know, it really sort of depends on the extent and nature of the evidence and whether it's pursued by the investigators and the prosecutors. So, you know, I've seen this intense debate out there about whether this was a false flag. So let's just state the obvious. You know, the timing of this is quite fortuitous for the genocidal entity, right? They are now engaged in more barbaric behavior and deadly behavior in Gaza than probably at any time since this genocide began. They're coming under levels of pressure that we haven't seen before. We talked about in our Reason to Resist, the statement of the Canadian, French, and UK governments, the threat of sanctions that they made, which was new. You know, the suspension of trade talks between the UK and Israel, the review that a majority of EU member states have asked the European Commission to conduct of the association agreement between Israel and the European Union. So, of course, the timing is extremely fortuitous. That's for sure. And the fact that this person, you know, shouted "Free Palestine" and they managed to capture this on video is extremely fortuitous. Let's just be, you know, just commonsensical about this. Anybody who's behaved the way Israel has behaved is perfectly capable of killing two of its own staffers. I mean, they've been killing, you know, they implemented the Hannibal Directive, you know, on October 7th. They admitted it and, you know, dropped enormous amounts of munitions on militants who were, you know, who had Israelis in their custody. They undoubtedly killed many Israelis. We don't know how many, but on that day alone. And they have killed hostages. I mean, there were 3, you know, hostages who managed to break free from their captors early on in the genocide. You may recall, they were males. They were all soldiers, and they had their shirts off, and they were waving a white flag, and the Israeli military shot them dead. So this is not difficult to believe at all. And I could go on and on of examples of, you know, the Zionist entity sacrificing Jewish lives in order to pursue its agenda. But so it's a possibility. It's a possibility that we should contemplate. We should be alert to any objective evidence that this is in fact was orchestrated in some way. But there's no, you know, there's no hard evidence that it was at this stage. So I don't assume that it isn't a false flag, and I don't assume that it is a false flag. My mind is open to both possibilities, and I think we just have to do what we can as journalists and citizens of conscience to try to get to the bottom of this. It certainly has, the timing stinks to high heaven. That's for sure.
Dimitri, it wouldn't be the first diplomats that Israel kill of their own. They did kill their own prime minister in the past. So
yeah.
So,
so that's all I wanted to say about this, folks. I know this is a very, it's obviously a very difficult subject for us to talk about, given what is being done to our movement and so forth. But I felt it was necessary to, again, whether people agree or disagree with me, to have a candid conversation about this.
We have 30 more minutes. Dimitri, how's your laptop battery going so far?
I think I'll make it.
Okay,
so
great.
I have a laptop problem today, but I think I'll be fine.
Great. Okay. And for Ola, who said they missed the start, you'll be able to rewind to the beginning if you want to. So there's one topic that I wanted to talk to you about, Dimitri. It was the gathering between the president of South Africa, who went to Washington D.C. to meet with Donald Trump, and it was quite a funny interaction happening over there. That was just a few days after Trump was gifted a plane from Qatar, and it was to the intention of this gathering between the president of South Africa and the president of the United States was to restart relations with the United States, because Trump has been making various claims in the past of a genocide of white people and farmers in South Africa. And maybe we could start, Dimitri, just by looking at the wait, let me find the proper footage for this. At a little video over here.
I haven't seen this video, by the way, folks. I've read what happened in the meeting and press reports, but I haven't actually seen the video.
So, sorry, I have a little VPN going on here. Maybe that's okay. Great. So, are you guys able to watch? Oh, great! I always forget to share my screen whenever I'm sharing a Twitter tab. Okay, so this is the gathering at the Oval Office, or not the Oval Office, sorry, but anyways, just Trump's office over here.
Burial sites. Now this is very bad. These are burial sites right here. Burial sites. Over 1,000 of white farmers, and those cars are lined up to pay love on a Sunday morning. Each one of those white things you see is a cross, and there's approximately 1,000 of them. They're all white farmers, the family of white farmers. And those cars aren't driving, they're stopped there to pay respects to their family member who was killed. And it's a terrible sight. I've never seen anything like it. Both sides of the road, you have crosses.
The South African president looks
sorry, yeah. So the president of South Africa.
He's going to respond, is he?
We will continue watching, but he's clearly super confused. And I just want to start by saying that this video is just people putting random crosses on the highway. It's not an actual mass grave. This is just, it's supposed to be like a symbolism of white farmers getting killed. And pile them all up. And the president of South Africa is just like basically the first time he sees this has like, someone.
Let's hear what he has to say.
Have they told you where that is, Mr. President? No, I'd like to know where that is, because this I've never seen. Okay.
I mean, it's in South Africa.
It's in South Africa.
We need to find out.
Well, okay, so does he have more to say?
Not really. Well, there's other. I don't know how to. Okay.
So
there has been. Also, Trump ended up showing like footage that occurred in Congo but claimed to be in South Africa. So there's basically what the United States is pushing right now, that there's massive human rights abuses going on in South Africa. Therefore, we need to bring white farmers from South Africa into the United States as refugees. President of South Africa has no idea what the hell's going on. And clearly, this is more sensationalist than it is actually real. So, Dimitri, what are your immediate thoughts when you see this?
Yeah, well, let's just park the whole question of the veracity of this. This is just complete fantasy. And we can talk about that and about Trump's, racism. The man is a frothing at the mouth racist. But really, I think what really stands out for me, I'm asking myself as I watch this thing for the first time, how would I feel if I were an American citizen and I were living in the United States? I would feel really horrified at what has happened to my country, because this whole episode that we just witnessed it's absurd. It's not just wrong as a factual matter. It's not just a figment of Donald Trump's racist imagination, but it shows the degree to which the office of the President of the United States has become a clown show. It's like watching a Monty Python movie. It's the theater of the absurd. This man, I mean, even if he believed it to be true, just normal diplomatic protocol would have dictated that he give the South African president a heads up that he was going to raise this in their meeting, and not spring on him some video image that he's never seen before that comes from who knows where. He would, as a matter of, and say, I'm going to raise this with you in the press room when the press is in front of us, and I want to give you a fair opportunity to respond, whatever, just simple diplomatic protocol. This was clown show extraordinaire. And this is why I say that, Trump, I think in a way, Trump is it's in a horrifying way, Trump is doing the anti-imperialist movement a favor, because he's going to accelerate the demise of the Anglo-American Empire. He's making it a virtual guarantee that the Anglo-American Empire is beyond salvation. And there you have an example of this.
I feel like one side of this issue that I feel like we're forgetting is that South Africa is the main sponsor of the genocide charges against Israel at the ICJ. And America is now claiming that South Africa itself is committing genocide. Do you see that this charade happening over here, or this theater that Trump is doing, is meant to come to the defense of Israel into delegitimizing and discrediting South Africa, as in, how could it have legitimate claims against Israel of genocide when they're committing one themselves?
Yeah,
which they're obviously
great point. Great point, Rami. I think almost certainly the answer is yes. That this is a big part of the motivation. Although, Elon Musk comes from South Africa. He too is a white supremacist. So there's probably something, this has some connection to Elon. But yeah, sure, of course. I mean, that's a very plausible interpretation of what's going on here. They're trying to discredit South Africa with these outrageous claims of a white genocide. Maybe Trump doesn't even believe this crap to be true. He's just saying it to make South Africa look bad, knowing that it's all complete and utter nonsense.
And it's very funny as well that Trump, who has been the main person talking against refugees, who said we should shut down the border, close down the border, and has been talking about deporting people that have been speaking in favor of Palestine, is now congratulating white farmers or white South Africans to come to the United States, and that they're legitimate refugees fleeing persecution. So that's just obviously something super absurd that I was able to take notes from this interaction over here. So we're going to start taking questions. So folks, if you can just make sure that the questions are quite visible, because the chat goes on very, very quickly, and I try to, star them or save them.
So, hey, before we do that, can we just deal with that one
tweet?
Yeah, but I just wanted to say one thing about the South African issue before we leave it, and then yes, I'd like to talk about not the tweet, the UN statement about the 14,000 babies.
Okay.
But before that, I just want to share a fact with people. Some 70% of commercial farmland in South Africa, decades after the apartheid system was supposedly dismantled, 70% is owned by whites, who make up just 7% of the population. That is why the government is trying to implement a more vigorous land redistribution law, not slaughter whites. That's not what they're doing. You know, the white population that dominates land ownership in South Africa to this very day, you know, some of them are getting very worked up because they don't want to lose their privileges. So that's an important fact to consider as we contemplate the circus in the White House. So yeah, Remy, I want to just talk about that article because you know, Zionists are making a big stink about this, relating to the 14,000 Palestinian babies who are said to be at risk of starvation. So if you could pull up that article that I showed you.
Can you see it?
Yeah, so this is a Times of India article. You can find a number of articles like this in the last couple of days. Because the title up there is UN walks back 14,000 Gaza baby death claim after backlash. So the background to this, many of you will know, is that on Tuesday of this past week, Tom Fletcher, the head of humanitarian aid at the United Nations, told the BBC in an interview that if sufficient aid was not delivered to the people, the starving civilian population of Gaza within 48 hours, up to 14,000 babies in Gaza were at risk of starvation. So subsequently, he was forced to modify his statement. They call it a walk back in this article. And, you know, in other Western corporate media, Zionist social media accounts, they're saying that he had to retract it and so forth. Let's scroll down to the very end of this article, Rami, if we can, and see what this controversy is actually all about. I think that's beyond, I think you've gone beyond the end of the article. Here it is. The figure 14,000. So this is in the paragraph in the middle of the page, which starts with however. The BBC later confirmed that the figure of 14,000 was based on an integrated food security phase classification report that estimated around 14,100 cases of severe acute malnutrition among children aged 6 to 59 months over a year-long period from April 2025 to March 2026. So he didn't get the number wrong. You know, he said 14,000. It's 14,100 cases estimated of severe acute malnutrition among children 6 to 59 months. So this is less than 5 years old. We're talking about toddlers, basically, and babies. Now, the Zionist lobby is apoplectic that Fletcher got this wrong, because he said 48 hours, when in fact this was envisioned to happen over a period ending in March 2026, which is 10 months from now. So it's not 48 hours, it's 10 months, according to this expert analysis. Okay. How is this? I can't believe that people would think that this is somehow a vindication for Israel. Okay, Tom Fletcher made a significant error. It's been corrected. It's not an irrelevant error. You know, there's a big difference between, you know, another 10 months and 48 hours, of course. But whether it be 10 months or whether it be 48 hours, over which 14,000 plus Palestinian toddlers are plunged into a state of severe acute malnutrition, with the result that many of them actually die. How that's vindication for Israel is absolutely mind-boggling to me. And I think the reaction to this, the way this is being used by the Zionist lobby as some kind of vindication, shows just how little they actually devalue Palestinian life. The story here should be the 14,100 cases of severe acute malnutrition amongst children less than 60 months old. That should be the story, whether it's going to happen over a 10-month period or 48 hours. But for them, the story is that Tom Fletcher got the time period wrong. Nothing more needs to be said about that depravity. So why don't we begin with the Q&A?
Yeah, still waiting for more questions to jump in, but also Israel has been coming. Dimitri, I'm not sure if you've been following the former or the ISIS leader in Gaza, Abu Shabab, who has been looting and attacking aid convoys across Gaza, and under the protection of Israel, he's been patrolling the streets of Gaza with guns. So clearly, it's been quite a policy of the Zionist entity to obstruct aid delivery. So even as aid is entering Gaza, we have Israel is empowering looters to ensure that aid does not go to the most vulnerable people. So,
and it's killing. And if the trucks are being guarded by, Palestinian militants, not being, absconded with by criminals, Israel kills them. Israel targets them. So that's the cynical and really just satanic game that's being played here. Not only is Israel, letting in a fraction of the aid that needs to be let in to stave off mass starvation, but they're doing everything they can to prevent people from actually accessing the little aid that's getting in, including blowing up bakeries, by the way, and killing people who are working in bakeries. Sorry,
we have Paul Ambrose saying, "What do you think of the new aid plan involving mercenaries?" And there's I believe Switzerland. Dimitri, you might have to correct me on this, but I believe there's been a case brought up against a Gaza aid group that is complicit with the new aid plan that is being investigated by Switzerland. Do you have anyone?
Somebody did some very good reporting on this. Unfortunately, his name escapes me. But in the past few weeks, I think it was, somebody set up a shady corporation in Switzerland and designated it a humanitarian foundation for the delivery of aid to people in Gaza. And it seems to have some connection. I can't remember the details. I read an article which was thoroughly sourced and documented how this was connected to a prominent Zionist in Europe, this entity. And it's now become the cover story. And the Israeli media, by the way, is reporting that this organization has no experience whatsoever with the delivery of humanitarian aid, and that Netanyahu approved the use of this organization to supposedly deliver aid to people in Gaza without informing or seeking the advice of the Israeli military. And this has caused some problems for Netanyahu in his relationship, his already very troubled relationship with the leadership of the Israeli military. Pictures surfaced of these so-called humanitarian aid workers. I posted one of them on my X account and also discussed it in one of our interviews this week. I think it was with Rahab Nazal, where they look like, soldiers. They're big, beefy guys, military-age men, wearing bulletproof vests, and a number of them bearing arms. There are indications from humanitarian experts that what Israel is planning to do is to use the food, the humanitarian aid, as bait, effectively, so that people are forced to come to these mercs in their desperation, and then who knows what will be done with these people. If Israel, for any reason, adjudges them to be undesirable. And it also would be a way for Israel to suck the civilian population into some little corner on the border of Gaza, where they will then be, wiped out and or expelled into the Sinai if Israel can get away with it. So, but there are reports, all kinds of contradictory reports about how this is going to play out, and there are. I've seen reports saying that indicating that Netanyahu is going to capitulate, and that the aid is going to be delivered ultimately through the traditional, experienced and independent humanitarian aid organizations that have operated for many years in Gaza.
Also, Dimitri, the World Central Kitchen has spoken against this new aid plan, and the World Central Kitchen is already a shady organization that is colluding with the United States. So that just shows the extent of how unrealistic that plan is.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a couple of questions here. The next question that we should maybe answer is, okay, this one is a bit more, let's just say, speculative, but if we look beyond that, if Netanyahu dies from terminal cancer, which it appears he has, does this necessarily mean the end of Likud party dominance in Israel politics for the near future? I think we could rephrase this question, Dimitri, as in, what does a post-Netanyahu Zionist entity look like? If he leaves, does that mean the end of Likud? Does that mean the end of, could we see a more far-right party come into place, or will that bring it back to the center or left? And that also makes me think a bit of the recent comments by Ehud Olmert saying that Netanyahu is committing war crimes and bringing the demise of Israel. But yeah, curious to know your thoughts, Dimitri.
Thank you for the question, Arcane Eclectic. Love your screen name. This is a very good question, and it's complicated, and I'm not up to speed on the intricacies of Israel's domestic policies fully, although I have, I think, a good sense of what's going on. My own sense, for what it's worth, is that if for any reason Netanyahu is forced to leave the political scene, whether it's sickness or conviction by an Israeli court, whatever it may be, that the most likely candidate to replace him would be Naftali Bennett, who is not, I believe, Likud. I think he was Likud, but then he started his own party. Although Naftali Bennett recently had some kind of cardiac event, it looks like he's recovering from that reasonably well so that he would be able to assume the functions of prime minister, but he has a health issue. But I think he is the one who's most likely to replace Netanyahu as prime minister, which would mean that Likud would be maybe a member of a coalition, but would not be. In fact, if Netanyahu is gone, I think Naftali Bennett probably would be willing to work with Likud as part of a coalition. And certainly, when it comes to Palestinians, Naftali Bennett is probably perfectly aligned with Netanyahu. Maybe he would be more inclined to do a deal with the Palestinian militants to get the remaining hostages, the prisoners of war, out. That's what they are. They're all soldiers, prisoners of war. But I think he would ultimately resume the destruction of Gaza and do everything within his power to wipe out the Palestinian people throughout historic Palestine. That's the kind of, bloodthirsty war criminal who Naftali Bennett is. Naftali Bennett once boasted about all the Arabs he had killed. Naftali Bennett was a commander of an Israeli military force that bombed a UN sanctuary in South Lebanon. I believe it was back in the 90s, and killed something like 110 people, civilians who were sheltering there, and never had to face any. This is before he boasted publicly about all the Arabs he had killed. Man is, every bit as I think dangerous to the Palestinian people as Netanyahu. As far as the Canadian, I think the Yair Lapid is a possibility, but I think he would have a tougher time mustering the necessary votes. Amazingly, many Israelis view him as too left-wing, which is just, the whole Israeli political elite, including Yair Lapid, Isaac Herzog, Naftali Bennett, Avigdor Lieberman, all of these people can be fairly described as far right. It's not just Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. They're all far right. And so the only way really to protect the Palestinian people is dismantling the Zionist entity at this stage. It has to be completely dismantled.
We have this question from Mommy Teddy Bear. How is it no one is taking the UN to court? Are all countries held hostage by is not real? Has Trump decided to loot the Vatican? Is that why he wants Ukraine talks in Vatican City? I think the main question here that I wanted to hear your opinion on is how is it no one is taking the UN to court? And I think this opens up the door to talking about, is there any way or any mechanism in place to hold the UN accountable for allowing a genocide from happening?
Well, the ICJ is designed to, its mandate is to adjudicate claims against states. The United Nations is not a state. I don't believe, I'd have to go back and check the UN Charter, but I don't believe that the International Court of Justice, which was established by the United Nations Charter, confers jurisdiction on the International Court of Justice to adjudicate claims against international organizations as opposed to states. The ICC, the International Criminal Court, is its mandate is to adjudicate claims of war crimes and crimes against humanity against individuals, not states, but individuals. So that leaves kind of a lacuna. I don't know that there is an international tribunal that could pursue the United Nations, but individuals at the United Nations who are complicit in war crimes or crimes against humanity against the Palestinian people, in theory, they should be, capable of being prosecuted by the International Criminal Court. I don't think if they have been accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity that they would have diplomatic immunity from prosecution by the ICC. Because they served in a capacity at the United Nations. So as individuals, I think probably could be prosecuted by the ICC. But again, we come back to the fact that these organizations have all been structured in such a way as to protect war criminals from the West or war criminals who are favored by the West, right? So
now, Dimitri, the League of Nations was created after World War I. And then it collapsed during World War II. And after World War II, we came up with the United Nations. The United Nations failed to bring an end to the war in Ukraine. The genocide in Gaza seems to be impossible to stop, at least by the side of the United States. And there's clearly no one being able to put enough pressure on the West to stop the genocide in Gaza. Do you kind of see that there will be a, how do we say this, a need to create a new, I don't like to use the word world order here, but like some new global institutions in order to come to fix these wrongs that have been happening for the last decades or so? I mean,
well, the
United
Nations
paralyzed. You said that it's come to the defense of Western war criminals. Then, I mean, then in some case, if we know these organizations don't work and they're meant to whitewash these people, what does the day after United Nations look like?
It's a very important question for all of humanity. I mean, the ICC has been totally and utterly discredited. I don't think that the ICC can function as an enforcer of international law any longer. I would be astonished if Netanyahu and or Gallant are actually prosecuted by the ICC.
But
as I mentioned,
goes beyond the ICC as well, right? We look at the UN Security Council, like just the United States could veto. I mean, Israel has a veto.
Yeah, I was going to deal with that next. Yeah, so okay. the fundamental, I've said this many times, Rami, we have to get rid of the veto. Have to get rid of the veto. And the General Assembly, its resolutions have to be given the force of law. Right now, they do not have the force of law. And I also think that you have to institute some system of voted weighting in the General Assembly, because it's outrageous that, Micronesia, which has less than 20,000 inhabitants, I think, has the same vote as China or India. That's outrageous. So I'm not saying that necessarily the voting should be perfectly reflective of the distribution of the human population, but there has to be some accommodation made for the fact that, some states have a lot more people than others. And right now, they don't really make any accommodation for that in the voting. But the main issue is, eliminate the veto and institute and make the General Assembly resolutions enforceable as a matter of law. If we did that, there would be a huge improvement in international legal governance.
Okay. Where did all the questions disappear? Oh, they're here. Okay. So,
I just want to respond to Philip's question. Philip asks, Philip Blair, do we need veto override capability for the UN General Assembly? That too would be, and I hadn't thought about that, Philip, but that too would be a very promising improvement in the governance of the United Nations. I guess it would depend on how high the bar is for overriding a veto. If you set it too high, then it becomes, as I'm sure you'll agree, not of a lot of utility. But if it's at a reasonable level, like 60% or 2/3, yeah, that would be a huge improvement.
Also, it's absurd, as Paul Ambrose says. He says, move the UN to Canary Islands. I think it's absurd that the United Nations is headquartered in New York, of all places, or the belly of the beast.
Yeah.
The country with the biggest track record of war crimes. So quite something. So let me see what else I have here. This is a comment from Donna Vorch that was quite interesting as well. Is refeeding a starving person isn't just handling a plate of food. Acute malnutrition often requires medical care for recovery. There's no medicine available for the north of Gaza, right? It's opening the borders is not enough. As in, it's not just you give food. I mean, Donna, I don't have the biggest credibility to speak about medical issues here, but it's going to be a huge undertaking to remedify the impact of malnutrition that the children in Gaza are already suffering. So I think, yes, this is a lot more than just opening the border and just giving meals to people. This requires medical attention.
Very, very important point, right? I mean, we need because we're operating in an environment where Israel and its supporters and these compliant or complicit governments in the West are doing everything possible to put Westerners at ease about the crisis created by the obstructions to the humanitarian aid. So, they're making a big to-do about the fact that trucks have started going back in, and the number seems to be going up, perhaps. But you're quite right to point this out. The number of trucks that was going in before the genocide began was 500 to 600 trucks a day. Now, in order to deal with the starvation that has beset much of the population, you would need many more trucks than that, I would think, plus a rapid buildup of medical treatment capability after a systematic destruction by Israel.
So, Dimitri, maybe we have the time for 2 more questions. This one is from Haritos. Great name as well. Do you think we will get a nuclear deal? I believe he's referring to the Iran-USA negotiations that have been going on. Any comments on that, Dimitri?
No, I don't think we will. As many of you know, I was in Iran recently. We were afforded the opportunity to have a 1.5-hour meeting with the spokesperson of the Iranian Atomic Energy Organization. And he and the foreign minister of Iran and other Iranian officials have made it, including, senior people in the Revolutionary Guard Corps, have made it crystal clear that Iran will not give up its capacity to enrich uranium. It will not give it up. It's willing to accept limitations, but it has the right, by the way. The Western media, they put the word right in quotation marks when they write about Iran's right to enrich uranium. They shouldn't be putting it in quotation marks. They have the right to enrich uranium for peaceful purposes. And the U.S. So the U.S. intelligence agencies themselves have said this year that they assess that Iran is not trying to develop a nuclear weapon. So they have the right. They're not going to give it up, especially when Israel is enriching uranium and has nukes, and the United States is enriching uranium up the wazoo. And now, we are hearing, inflexible demands by senior officials in the Trump administration. I think even Witkoff is now saying no enrichment, zero enrichment. Before he was sounded flexible on that point. And the Republicans just signed a letter. Almost every Republican senator except Rand Paul signed this letter. And then something like 177 Republican Congress critters signed the letter. And they said they will not under any circumstances accept Iran having any enrichment capability. Where is the middle ground? Where's the overlap in their positions? There's no overlap. And those are, that doesn't leave, address other issues. Like the Americans want the Iranians to get rid of their ballistic missiles. It's not going to happen. The Americans and the Israelis want Iran to stop supporting Hezbollah and Ansar Allah and other resistance groups. I don't think that's going to happen. So I hope I'm wrong about this, but I just don't see how this ends up in a negotiated deal.
I think the purpose of the negotiations is to, the negotiations already come at a loss for Iran. It's acknowledging that Iran is a potential threat if it has nuclear capabilities in its hands. And it also is a form of delegitimizing Iran's sovereignty. We don't tell France to put their to limit their uranium enrichment, their nuclear civilian infrastructure. It's probably one of the countries that produces the most electricity out of nuclear. So it's again supposed to create a form of exceptional case for Iran, right? When, if anything, Israel is a country that has, well, not a country, it's an entity that has nuclear weapons and is not a signatory of the Non-Proliferation Act.
Philip noted in the chat by Philip Blair that, and he's quite right about this, that the U.S. government was actually, it actually is the one that helped Iran develop uranium enrichment capability before the Iranian Revolution. And until at that point when it happened, they basically cut off all supplies and assistance to Iran, and their research reactor in Tehran, which I visited during my visit there to the country, had to be shut down for a number of years.
So maybe one last question that we have here, which is from Maria Sharambus, who says, has Trump sanctioned the ICJ? This reminds me of an article I read about the prosecutor Khan, who I think there's new harassment or sexual misconduct claims that have been pushed against him. And yeah, Dimitri, any thoughts on Maria's question here?
To my knowledge, Maria, nice to have you in the live stream again. He's not threatening to sanction the International Court of Justice, which is, established by the UN Charter, and it's often referred to as the World Court. I wouldn't be surprised if he tries, but so far he hasn't done that. But obviously, he has done that to the ICC. And as I mentioned earlier, this has caused, paralysis at the International Criminal Court, the one that indicted Netanyahu and Gallant. And it's so bad that not only the investigation into their war crimes has been ground to a halt, but pretty much all of the investigative work of the ICC has been ground to a halt. So they in February, they put into effect, the Americans, an order that bans Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor, and other non-Americans from entering the U.S., and it threatens any person, institution, or company with fines and prison time if they provide the chief prosecutor with financial, material, or technological support. Okay, so you're not going to provide anything. You're just going to completely, refuse to have any dealings with Karim Khan, or else you're going to put yourself in a situation of great jeopardy.
And Dimitri, I think, was it Google or Microsoft shut down Karim Khan's emails? So that's quite something here. And maybe one last question is, Dimitri, any word on your request to debate them lawyers, or are they still no-show?
No one has accepted my debate challenge. 25 Zionist lawyers have now had, I don't know, is it 2 months? Not one of them has accepted my debate challenge. I did get an email from one of them. I'm not going to identify who it was as a courtesy because that person doesn't want to be identified, inviting me to have a private conversation about, I guess, the issues that I want to debate. I don't know exactly what the conversation is going to be about, but they invited me to have a private conversation, and you know, I'm open to having that conversation. I just haven't been able to arrange it yet. But that's it. That's the only interaction I've had, real response I've had to my challenge to these 25 lawyers.
So, folks, Dimitri, should we wrap this up?
Yes, I think that's good to go. My computer's almost dead, and I'm sure people are getting ready to move on. We've been going for over 90 minutes. Thanks very much, folks. Always a pleasure to talk with you. And if you found this this live stream, this discussion to be informative, please like the video. And if you're not a subscriber, I hope you'll become one. Peace out.
And yeah, and make sure to check out Patreon, Telegram, Twitter, YouTube, subscribe. See you, folks. See you next week.
Stay strong, everybody. Bye-bye.